Hello again from Knit One TV. In this programme I want to show you another variation of casting on. This is the weaving cast on. It's a cast on which gives you a more stable edge than the open edge cast on, but is not a finished edge. It's also one of the methods that you'll find in the Knitmaster Silver Reed manuals rather than the Brother machine manuals, but you can do it on both machines. To start with, I need to bring a group of needles forward. So I've brought my needles forward, and then with the 1x1 side of my comb, I'm going to bring alternate needles forward to the holding position. So you've got half the needles in normal working position and half the needles in the holding position. I then need to set my carriage so that the weaving brushes are working. So on the Brother machine, that means pushing the lever up so that the weaving brush is now engaged on both sides of the sinker plate. So the weaving brushes are engaged. If you're going to do this cast on a Knitmaster or Silver Reed machine, again, you need to set your carriage so that it will weave the stitches, but you don't want to be selecting from the pattern reader. So your side levers should be opposite the little circle on either side, but you do need to engage your weaving brushes. So on the Knitmaster machine, that means moving little levers at the side here so that the weaving brushes are engaged as well. The other thing that's also wise to check is to make sure that your carriage hasn't been set to holding position, i.e. it will knit the needles that are in the forward position normally. So having set my carriage up and my needle arrangement is correct, I'm going to take the yarn and put it into the yarn feeder, and then with the end of the yarn I'm going to bring the yarn over the top of the needles that are forward. So I've got a length of yarn going over the top of the needles and is being held on the side opposite the carriage. My tension dial is the tension I need for the yarn I'm using, so I'm now going to knit one row. I just take the carriage over the needles and I've now knitted one row. So there are loops in every needle and the thread is holding the loops in place. So on a Brother machine you can now hang the comb if you want, or on a Knitmaster machine you may find it's advisable to push the needles forward, but in fact because your weaving brushes are engaged, they should push the knitting down for you so that you can continue to knit without having to keep pulling them forward. After you've knitted about 4 rows, I would hang the side weights. This just helps to make sure that the edge stitches knit off cleanly. You don't have to use them, but generally I prefer to have a little bit of weight on the edge just in case the edge stitches keep dropping. And then you can continue to knit. After I've knitted probably about 5 or 6 rows, I would disengage my weaving brushes. So that means pushing them back down so that they're not being used anymore. You don't want to keep on using your weaving brushes throughout the piece of knitting because it brushes the yarn that you're knitting, so the fabric gets a sort of brushed look to it, and it also wears the brushes, so you'd have to replace them more quickly and the weaving cast on won't work as well with worn brushes. You continue knitting through however long you need to knit, and then you can take the knitting off the machine. If I just take the weights off here, and hold this edge out, you should be able to see that the stitches are held with a thread of yarn running through them, which was the weaving yarn that we laid across the needles right at the beginning. It isn't a finished edge because, as you can see, I can pull this yarn and it will pull the edge in, which is very useful if you want a gathered edge, but that's not always what you want. So you do need to be careful, if you don't want the edge pulled in, that you don't pull on the end of the weaving yarn. It's a very simple, straightforward method of casting on, as long as, say, your weaving brushes are not worn, and it's quite quick. So it's a good method to learn for just starting and stopping samples, tension swatches, etc. Hopefully you'll find that useful, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.